Hi all, it's Sarah, and it's that time of year again. I am teaching my Mastering the Art of Great Conflict workshop. So if you are an author out there who is writing romance or really anything, and you are struggling with how to make sure that there's enough conflict and the pages are turning, this just might be the class for you. It runs from October 6th, which is this coming Sunday, straight through November 3rd. It has a 2-hour live workshop on October 6th, and then multiple workshops and prompts and experiences and worksheets, a bunch of new content that I've developed that I will be dropping in a private Discord over the course of the month. And on Wednesday, October 9th, there will be a participant-only live panel of authors Sophie Jordan, Angelina M. Lopez, and C. Travis Rice, who have all been on the podcast and are avowed favorites of ours, discussing the ways they build conflict in their books. There'll be text-based lessons and discussion boards and reading lists, and hopefully it'll be a month of really great material for you and for me to think about conflict and think about how we can make the books better, stronger, and more fast-paced. You can find out more about this by visiting my website, sarahmclean.net, and clicking on class. Thanks so much for taking a look, and I hope to see you on Sunday. Take care. Jen, we're phone banking.
We are.
Tell everybody about it.
Now that it's October, we are phone banking every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 Eastern time with Indivisible to different states in order to encourage everyone to get out to vote for Harrison Walls in the upcoming election, which is coming up in early November. Obviously, the most important thing you should be doing is making sure your voter registration is still valid. They have been removing people from the polls all over based on any number of things. So checking that your registration is still valid is the most important thing you can do. If you are up for phone banking, we would love to have you join us. All you need to do is go to www.fadedmates.net/fadedstates, and you will get all the details, all the sign-up links, and come along. Free books for everybody, just for joining the phone banks. Lots of prizes, lots of fun, and maybe special guests, and saving democracy.
What could be better?
What could be better?
And there it is. So join it. We hope to see you on Saturday. And otherwise, here we go with Meg.
We're trailblazing again, Sarah.
I was thinking today, I'm not sure. We haven't trailblazed in a while.
We have not.
We've actually, that's not true. We have done a couple of interviews that are like being held for, we're trying
to figure it out, right?
Fancy.
Yeah.
We're trying to we've been doing some interviews that are going to be in like group
packages.
Yes.
Right.
Because like now we're getting into places where like we're not sure who the exact trailblazer is. So we're collecting voices.
Yeah. Well, and I think for some of them, what we've realized is like we might not be able to talk to or know. So we're kind of like, what is the reader experience then? Or like, and so I think the Trailblazers, this one we're talking today to Meg Cabot, which is super exciting.
Very exciting.
But we have some ideas for future ones that might look a little different, but we think that will be an exciting evolution of the form.
Yeah. 7 seasons in, we're just like mixing it up, keeping it fresh.
We're trying.
The other day, my daughter was like, do you think you'll do the podcast forever with Jen? And I was like, maybe. We keep having shit to say.
I mean, that's a part that is amazing. I'm constantly still like, one of the reasons I think we're both really excited today is Meg is our first YA trailblazer, right? And so many readers to adult romance come online through YA romance. And for many, many people, it's like there's that group of kind of Sarah Dessen and Meg Cabot and the Princess Diaries, which was such a double threat because it was the book and the movie, right? You could sort of take that whatever way you wanted. And I think that it's exciting for us to think about, right? Like what brings people into the genre. And for lots and lots of people, it's YA romance, right? And so I think we're really excited to have her here to kind of, I don't know, like talk about like the expansion of kind of like, what does it mean to be a romance reader, and where do romance readers kind of arrive or come from?
Yeah. And I mean, what a cool thing. Well, we'll get to it. We'll come back after, as usual, everyone, and do a post game. I have some things that I want to talk about that I think are very cool. But welcome, everyone, to Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor. And here we go with Meg Cabot.
Welcome, Meg Cabot. We are so excited to have you with us.
I am so excited to be here. I can't believe it. I've been such a long time listener, and now I get to be on the show and see what happens behind the scenes. This is very exciting for me personally.
Well, I was just saying to Jen before you got here that I'm very excited because I get to talk about some of my very favorite YA novels as part of this conversation, which I don't think I've ever done with you because we have met before, but I'm always very nervous. So now I get to... Now I'm feeling limber.
Yeah. It's not always, but a lot of times it's a professional situation. So we have to talk about
right.
Professional thing.
I can't be like,
you can't fangirl.
Talk about All American Girl.
Oh my God, you're so good. I love a chance. I was looking forward to this because I'm like, ooh, we're going to dish. We're going to talk about some dishy stuff. So I love it. Yeah.
That's the best part for sure.
Yeah.
So Meg, just start off by telling us your journey to romance, right? Either as a reader and then what made you start writing it?
I think my journey is very similar to probably I think a lot of romance writers, in that I loved writing just since I was a kid. And I think it was partly because my parents were both teachers. And so we had books everywhere. And whenever we would come up to them and be like, I'm bored, they'd hand us a book. Almost always a totally age appropriate book. Yeah. It's like, you're Jane Eyre or you're 10, enjoy. Which worked out great. I mean, I was like, that was my first romance, was Jane Eyre, which, now looking back, it's like, wow, that was really sick and twisted, but I loved it. And I guess what really sparked the whole thing was that I went to see Romancing the Stone as a teenager in the theater. And I was like, wait, you can write this?
Amazing. You are Joan Wilder. You were like, I gotta be her.
That's who I wanted to be. And I liked the part where she's writing.
Yeah.
This is the very beginning. And then she feeds her cat the little can of tuna.
Yeah.
I was like,
tuna.
That's the pinnacle of success. That's all I want out of life. And I have achieved it. So I don't want to brag, but I have a cat, I write romances, and I get to feed the cat little cans of tuna. When I do it all the time. She only did it apparently when she had just finished a book. And then magically the editor read it right in front of her, which
in front of her.
That does not happen in real life, but I thought it did. And so
can you imagine how horrifying it would be to sit there while your editor was
literally the best part of that movie?
And
it's
instantly,
the editor's crying.
Tomorrow, I handed it to you, and now you have notes.
But no, I started reading because I was like, I obviously have to do research for this job. So I started reading everything that in the Monroe County Public Library in Bloomington, Indiana, that was romance oriented. So I was right at the pinnacle, 80s, 90s of that. Yeah, Rosemary Rogers. I had Kathleen Woodowitz. Who else? I hate to say it. I loved Barbara Cartland as a kid.
Oh, okay.
I know. No, she's very, very sketchy now.
We don't hear as much because it's a little bit different. It's sort of removed.
Retro.
Yeah.
It's very retro. And my library had so many of them. And they even had ones that she wrote that were set in the 1960s with cool kind of spy girls and stuff. So I loved it. But of course, every single one was very, very much about a virgin. So
well, that was just the time. I mean, I don't think people had any idea. I was a big Harlequin Presents girly at the time.
Oh, yes.
Right? And
excellent stuff.
Every single Carol Mortimer book was she's a 27 virgin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I went down that rabbit hole. I got super into the fake romances.
Oh
I
yeah.
want to say.
Yeah.
I have a Penny Jordan here
Penny
that I've
Jordan.
had since the 80s. Daughter of Hassan.
Oh my God. You guys, Meg is holding up old school Harlequins. Well,
yeah.
Amazing.
It has camels. It has camels on the cover. Okay. It's so horrifying looking back now, but I loved it. And then I got into Susan Mallory's.
I didn't even hear that. That was a funny joke, you guys. I'm sorry.
Wait, what was the joke?
I said a different kind of hump. Sorry.
Anyway.
Good.
Always
fun
times.
So fun times.
So okay, so you're a teenager. You're reading
the romance.
The best
reading
stuff.
all the romance in the library because you're one of us, obviously.
Yeah. Of course. Then probably like you, I made the mistake of telling people that I wanted to be a romance writer in a college town where I was immediately told that is no. It was trash. That genre is trash. No, because that was a huge mistake. I had one friend whose mother taught in the English department, and she's like, no, that is actually, here are some books. This is Louisa May Alcott. These are all of the books that Louisa May Alcott wrote before Little Women, all of the romances. So I had some really good mentors, actually, even then. Yeah.
Nice. And so
I'm very appreciative.
So give us a sense now. So you know you want to be a romance novelist. What happens? You head off to
the big city.
What do you do?
You're like, I found myself an apartment.
Well, because I have to know that it's not just
taped up notes everywhere.
No, that's not at all what happened. I had to go to college, and I had to go to college in the town where I grew up.
College.
Yeah. Well, they make you.
Me too.
When both your parents are teachers. So I really wanted. This is such a crazy story, but I really wanted to obviously be a writer. So I was telling everybody when I got to college I was going to be a writer, and I was going to major in creative writing and English. And I met a guy at a party who was like, listen, I'm a creative writing major, and they will suck the love of writing out of you. So don't do that. If you really love doing something, kind of try to protect it. And so I listened to him, and I became an art major. Nice. And because I didn't care about art. And I was like, well, I can draw. If I get crushed in rejections, I don't care, because I felt like I would be crushed if I got a rejection for the romance writing I was doing. I was writing like whole novels, but I wasn't showing them to anyone because I was too embarrassed. But I don't know if he was right. I did take some creative writing classes, and it was true that nobody was writing romances in college level creative writing class.
Nobody's writing genre, right?
Like, nobody was writing genre at all. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It was a lot of suicide, and and I was like, man, you guys are super depressed, and nobody liked my stuff, but the teachers did, and so that was good. And then I just graduated with a degree in art, and I moved to New York City to be an artist. Which is just as bad as moving to New York City to be a writer.
To be an artist. My God.
My dad was like crying because he thought business. And he's like, oh my God. But he didn't do anything because it was free. My college was free because he taught there. So they couldn't. Yeah. So when I got to New York, I tried to be an artist. And that was.
What kind of art?
So I actually did.
What kind of art?
So, I wanted to be an illustrator. So I started getting stuff, you do the portfolio drop-offs. This was back in the 90s. So nothing was online. So you had to physically go and drop off your portfolio. And I did get some jobs, but I was always getting jobs where I'd be like, the writing of this isn't very good. Maybe I could just, a few suggestions.
Well, I fix this.
Yeah.
They don't want it. They don't want that. So that failed. So I just decided, I met that guy again, the guy from the party who told me not to be a creative writing major, and met him in New York.
Was it Jonathan Franzen or something? That'd be funny. He was like,
I was going to say, it's the husband, Jen.
Sorry, I didn't know.
You read a romance novel?
That would have been funny.
In real life. I was like, no, it was like,
Jonathan Franzen.
Your husband or your arch enemy.
That's amazing.
So aren't they the same thing though? Kind of. No. So he didn't become a writer. And he was like, when I told him that story, that the reason I didn't become a writing major was because of him. He was like, I was drunk. Why would you?
No, but it's
you were like, there's truth in it.
Listen, it worked out for the whole world that you didn't become a writing major, because it would have been a very different thing. Yeah. So,
well, he was the one who was super encouraging for me to start sending out all of the stuff that I'd been writing. So
let's talk about that, because you got to a place at this point. So you're trotting your portfolio all over New York City. You're married to the hot creative writing guy from college.
Oh, yeah.
And
I know.
And you are still, are you writing secretly in the bathroom? What are you doing?
I'm broke. I'm completely broke. So I got a full-time job at New York University in one of their dorms, and as like the administrative assistant, which was a perfect job for a writer because first of all, you're around really super creative college NYU students who are always having these massive, crazy adventures. And then it was really easy. So I could write at my job, which I would do every day until the kids woke up at like noon. And then I would have to
then you have to be on.
So I just kept writing, and I had the day job, and then I was writing on weekends and early in the mornings before kind of work started. And then I guess what happened was
the Patricia Cabot books.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're all of them because I started writing and I was getting rejected. So what happened was my dad died kind of suddenly, and that's when I realized, if there's something you want to do, you got to go out and do it. Because life's short. So that's when I got back from his funeral is when I started sending books out, and they all got rejected, but they were positive rejections,
So Meg, there's this legend that comes with Meg, like people talk about related to you, which is that you had like some massive number of manuscripts like under your bed.
Yeah.
And can you talk about that? Because I want to know what's true.
No, it's true. First of all, I had all books that I had written like in high school, which of course I didn't have computers back then. There were no computers. So I just hand wrote everything or I typed it. So I had all these manuscripts. So I was trying to sell those. Obviously I typed them up, and they were mysteries. Some were historical romances, a lot of contemporary kind of humor. And people were really positive in the rejections, but for like 4 years, I got nothing but rejections. But they would say things like, well, we like this, but we can't find a place for it. Those kind of rejections. And then finally, I got an agent, and she signed on with it was a romance novel that never got published. It was a medieval historical romance. And she sent it around. Yes, thank you. The editors were like, we're not taking medieval right now, but we really are looking for Victorian. Can you do Victorian? And I was like, oh my God, 19th century? Yeah. Sign me up. So I just really fast amended a different book that I was writing. And that became Where Roses Grow Wild, which was my first Patricia Cabot. And I wrote it under another name because I didn't want my grandma to know that I was writing kind of like she's super, super Catholic. And at that time I was like, wow, she's going to be, even though I'm married, she's going to know that I know about sex, and I don't want her to know that. So I really cleverly changed my first name, thinking she'd never know. But it was fantastic. Yeah, I got signed with St. Martin's Press. And Jennifer Weiss was my first editor. She was amazing.
Who's who's now a legend. I mean, has edited so many big, huge names.
S&P was great. So I sold, but it was like back in those days, you got maybe $3,000, $4,000 for a 400-page manuscript. But I still had my day job. So then the college kids found out that I was writing sexy books at work, and they would come in with suggestions. It was really so cute. Like, oh, we did a drinking game based on your book. Every time you said the word nipple, we had to drink. I'm like, great.
This is terrific.
Sex positivity. And my poor parents, like my mom was like, had no idea what was going on. But it ended up being really fun. I got to go to RWA, which was back then, was still a hot mess, but it wasn't as much as it would become later. And that's where I met so many great, just supportive other romance writers. It was super great. I can't even like Beverly Jenkins, I think. We ended up working on a series for YA romances.
She has
with
that
Avon.
Right.
So I at that time my mom started dating, and so that was very hard on me. I was 30. I couldn't deal with my mother dating one of my teachers actually from back home. So I started writing about that. Yeah.
It's all cute with Hot for Teacher, Sarah, until it's for real, and then you realize the horror.
Yes, Mom.
Yes. This is therapeutic. Yes.
You're like, wait, she knows about sex too? No.
Yeah.
This cannot be born.
She would tell me about it. I was like, no, I don't want to know about this.
No.
But, so I started writing that because, you can't say to your mom, I'm really mad that you found love late in life. Because, I wasn't mad about that. I was mad about who she found it with. So I started writing a book about that. And it ended up being The Princess Diaries, which I thought I was writing for adults, just as like a contemporary. But the people who read it, like my agent, went, "Why is this girl 30 and she's so upset about her mom?"
And you were like, "What? What are you saying? What's wrong with that?"
Make her. I know. I was like, "Oh, is that weird?" Oh.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Book of the Month.
I was so excited when Eric told me Book of the Month was coming on as a sponsor, because we've been Book of the Month subscribers here for like a year, because I got real tired of people talking to me about books that they were loving that they got from Book of the Month. And I was like, I must become a member.
Yeah, well, and it's super fun, right? You get all your books come in this bright blue box. There's like a fun app with like track your reading process and take little quizzes or do a reading challenge with a friend. And so it offers all that like fun reader stuff that we all love. But my favorite thing about Book of the Month is the discoverability factor. So there are 5 books that they choose as their main selections every month. And I almost always pick a mystery or a thriller. And the reason for that is I have a hard time finding those books. I get real overwhelmed. I don't know who's cool or what's new or what I like. And so having them curate this great selection for me allows me to keep my focus on cool upcoming authors. And every book is so good. I like literally have never gone wrong with the Book of the Month selection.
No. So I also choose outside of romance. I've never chosen a romance, I don't think, through Book of the Month, although almost every month there is a romance, which is so great for everyone. And it's always like a big romance that people are talking about. But this month, because it's October, because I don't mind being scared, I'm not a scaredy cat like someone else on this podcast, I chose Dearest by Jackie Walters, which is a story about a new mom with a newborn who's all alone and really struggling. And a knock comes at the door, and it's her mother, who she hasn't spoken to in years. And her mom's just there to help, except it seems like once she arrives and she's in the house, she's brought something pretty evil along with her. I love it. I love an evil mom. So that's Dearest by Jackie Walters, and that is an October pick this year.
Yeah. So if you are interested, what you can do is click on the chapter title right now if your podcasting app supports it, or go to bookofthemonth.com. And if you use the code PUMPKIN, you can get your first book this month for only $5. While you're there, make sure you select Fated Mates from the drop-down menu so that they know who sent you there. Thanks to Book of the Month for sponsoring this week's episode.
Obviously, we want to get to the Princess Diaries, but I don't want to get there yet, because so you wrote a bunch of books. So you wrote a series of books as Patricia Cabot.
Yeah, I was writing them. Yeah.
I just want to say out loud, an improper proposal is on. There's a boat. It's brother's best friend. Listen,
there's dry humping in that book. There's so much dry humping.
I'm not complaining.
I'm
not complaining.
Yeah, see, it really is a humping. It was so much. I can't remember. Did I write that for St. Martin's Press? Because I went to Pocket, and then I had Amy Pierpont, who's also an amazing editor.
Yeah, I didn't know Amy Pierpont was at Pocket at that point.
I feel like that's where it was.
Now she's at Grand Central.
Yeah, no, this was before.
Yep.
And she's really great. There's something she said about, it might have been an improper proposal, where she said, book is a tapestry. You may have heard this before, but she says, a book is a tapestry, and it's my job to look for loose threads. And if I pull on those threads and the tapestry falls apart, that means you still have work to do. And I was so mad when she said that to me, because I was like, there are no loose threads. But then she would always find loose threads. And so that changed my whole perspective on editing, because I was like, editors do serve a purpose. That's a terrible thing to admit. Now I love editors. I'm like, please find my loose threads. But when I first started out, I was not happy when I would have to go back and revise.
Especially for somebody, like, how many books are we talking about underneath that bed?
Oh my God. It's got to be, I probably have like 100.
This is the legend, is that there are just like so many Meg Cabot books out there. But
like the way Prince had just tons of music written, you're
Prince.
You're
the Prince of romance.
I think, thank you, that I don't accept that, because he's amazing. But I do think when you use, which is what I realize I've been doing, when you use escaping it into your flow, into the books that you're writing as a way to, not deal with your actual problems. When I think back on that, I'm like, wow, I had a lot of problems that I was escaping by writing all these books. And I'm not sure that's not like such a good thing. But I've gotten a lot of therapy since then, and now I know the difference between escaping.
You're writing more slowly now, is what you're saying.
Writing more, yes, exactly.
But what I was saying is, that's for somebody who's written 100 books, right, without an editor, or, however many books you'd written without having any editorial eye, like, I'm sure that first moment with an editor is like, oh, here is a shocking experience, somebody else like giving feedback. But I do love that sort of pulling on the thread metaphor.
And after that I started thinking like editors, in a way, this is so random, but I always think of them as like the sheriffs of the town, and we writers are the cowboys. They're just in the bar like shooting it up. And the sheriff comes in and is like, what? There's a more productive way you could be living.
You could be shooting this up more efficiently.
Yeah, get it together, everyone.
Or just get out there and herd those cows. Herd the cattle. Do not shoot each other. And that's really how, for some reason, I've always thought of editors ever since. I'm like, I love them.
Hilarious.
They give us law and order. So, and then obviously I moved to Carrie Farron at HarperCollins. And she's not as strict a sheriff as Amy Pierpont, I would say, but she's pretty strict. She definitely found some.
I would say I also have published with Carrie for many years, and I would say she is strict she has a different way of being strict. You're being sort of secretly stricted.
Yeah. She does a lot of positive reinforcement, like with the smiley faces in the margin of the manuscript.
But then also a lot of show don't tell is just like a stake through the heart.
Oh my God. Right.
Anyway.
Info dump. And then she writes it.
Why? Question mark. Oh,
yeah. Why?
Brutal.
That's. Yes.
Anyway, but now we're in our own therapy, Jen. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm taking notes for my future editorial products. I often I'm like, why? Tell me blah blah blah. But now I'm just going to say why?
Question mark. It's so brutal.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's the bye-bye.
Because it could be existential too. Like, why am I here? Why am I reading this? What am I?
Exactly.
Why is this my life?
So many times I've had to like take a photo of the squiggle that she wrote and send it to her and been like, what? Just tell me, what do I need to do? Because I don't know.
Have I hurt you?
Yes.
Anyway, okay, so you've written all these books for adults with sex in them. And then Princess Diaries is your first YA. Yes?
Yes.
And so was it simply that like you'd written that you like kind of wrote your feelings out and then somebody was like, this is a YA novel? Because I also feel like there's this situation where when we were growing, like our generation, and we talk about this periodically, like we didn't have YA. Like we had The Outsiders and Judy Blume and whatever, I guess Catcher in the Rye. But but now but like YA was really like invented for a later generation than us. And I feel like this part of, obviously, like you're here as a trailblazer, and one of the things that we think of always as like a trailblazing YA romance is you, because it felt like transformative. I was just out of college when The Princess Diaries came out. I was working in publishing, and it was, it felt like the whole world was like changing because there were books for young people.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with just that moment in publishing them. I remember the Harry Potter books were kind of coming out at the same time. I was really mad about Harry Potter because that's like my book kept getting rejected. The Princess Diaries got rejected over and over and over, and because it was a lot of the rejections said things like, this is not appropriate for children. There wasn't this idea that kids and teenagers read for fun. Like you had to have a really harsh educational lesson. So if the character was a female and she was interested in sex, she had to, usually in those books, she would get pregnant and then die. That was very popular in what was YA back then.
Real Go Ask Alice vibes.
Exactly. Yes, totally. Anything that when the character made a mistake, it was usually fatal or at least ruined their life. And that's not reality at all. And bad things happen, but hopefully we can provide a path to these kids on how to navigate that, or maybe avoid making that mistake in the first place, but not have it be like that you die. So there was so much depressing stuff out there. One of the first YAs I ever read as a kid was about anorexia. It was a kid who got anorexia, and I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew that it was really bad, and the kid died at the end. And I was like, oh my God, like no tools were given on how maybe to have not had that happen. So I really wanted to write something when I learned that what I was writing was YA, which I did not know because I thought it was for 30-year-olds. I just aged the heroine down and made her be in high school, which was much more fun. Like she didn't have to go to a job anymore and she could go to like prom. It was great. I went, okay, I want to write books for girls who were like me, really depressed as a teenager and escaping into a world of romance, but maybe make it a little bit, not have as many harems and sheiks.
No.
There were in
Sure.
the books I was, and they don't have to be a virgin necessarily. They could have positive experiences with sex. So there was a lot of disbelief and rejection in that idea. But finally, Abigail McAdam at Avon Books was the one who took the Princess Diaries as it was and was like, yeah, it doesn't need, maybe take out all the F words. It did have a lot of swears.
So Abigail took it. Was this at this point was Mia 30 or was she?
No. I had revised it, and
was that
it was
basically your agent, like that decision?
Yeah, that was with my agent.
Who was that?
She loved it. Laura Langley is my agent. She's still my agent today. Yeah.
Okay.
We've been through this journey since like I think 1995. Oh my God, it's a long relationship. But she said, yeah, I think this could be YA. I don't know anything about that, but I'm going to research it. And she did. And she's the person who sent it out to with a Hollywood agent before it even found a publisher.
Oh, interesting.
She was like, I think this is really cinematic, and it got picked up by Whitney Houston as a movie, her production company, before it got published.
And so so this is the first time we've had this kind of conversation. Like, so did that work? So did that work in your favor publishing wise, or was it happening simultaneously?
Really?
It did not work in my favor at all. Nobody cared. I actually got, like, I would say, hey, this is going to be a movie. And they're like, everything gets options to be a movie. Everything. So it doesn't mean it's going to be made into a movie.
But even by Whitney Houston.
Yeah. No, I was still working at my day job.
Right. You were like, I'm still with the kids, waking up at noon.
I'm getting these phone calls from like the production company going, okay, well, we're going to have to kill off the character of the father in your books because we want to give the grandmother a bigger part. And if we kill off the dad in the movie version, then we can give the grandma more lines because we have a really great actress to play the grandma. And I'm like, well, I'm at my desk at NYU going, who's going to play the grandma in the movie of my book that hasn't been published? And they were like, oh, it's Julie Andrews.
Oh.
So
yeah,
I went,
were you like,
kill the dad,
you
kill him,
walk out of your,
kill anyone,
just, like, drop everything and walk out?
No, because they hadn't sent it. They don't send you the money. I'm just going to let people know. Like everybody used to read these articles in New York Magazine or whatever and like, yeah, she got this amount of money. And then no, it doesn't happen that way at all. Once they greenlight the shooting, then money comes in. And then I did just walk out.
You were like, I no longer work here. I'm sorry.
No, I love my boss. So I stayed and I tried to make everything
Julie Andrews
good.
knows who I am now. So goodbye.
I stayed through the whole check-in process of that year for the dorm. And then after everything and everybody was settled and all the room changes were done, I was like, okay, I got to go. And then I just took on so many. And then eventually the book did get published and they asked for more. And there were other ideas that I had.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by T.L. Smith, author of When He Reads to Me.
Sarah, this book was perfectly created for me in a lab, and I think all of our listeners are going to want to check it out because in this motorcycle club romance, check your content warnings, everybody, but I'm all aboard the T.L. Smith Express here. Milo Savage.
Oh, my God.
Perfect name. Is the head of the local motorcycle club, and he has really loved this woman named Lissy Petal for years. Problem is she is married to this real dirtbag named Cody.
No.
I know. Wait, Sarah. Cody refuses to divorce her, even though she is miserable and so unhappy. And
Milo's
so
going to handle it.
Milo is going to handle it. And here's how. Cody essentially goes to the motorcycle club and is like, I owe you all this money. Why don't you take my wife? And Milo essentially agrees, but what he wants from her, Sarah, you will die, is he asks her to come and read to him every night.
No.
Yes, Sarah. Yes. And
That's
so
it. She just has to come read to him.
come read to me. I would go to war for you, but also let you whisper sweet nothings in my ear. All he wants is to destroy her ex-husband, or her husband, I guess. And
I think he'll be ex or, widowed.
sure, right. Or no kneecaps, whatever it takes. And get her own private library. And I just want you to know that this forbidden romance with a broken woman who needs this delightful, perfect Milo Savage to take care of her.
Incredible. If you also want to read a book about a motorcycle kingpin who has a library fetish, then you can read When He Reads to Me by T.L. Smith right now in print, ebook, or audiobook. In special podcasting apps, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to T.L. Smith for sponsoring this week's episode. I didn't realize that this was the way that it worked. So I assumed it went the other way.
Wait, which part?
So,
you mean where you get a movie deal
you got
and
the
then
movie and then you got the book. So at this point, are they?
The book was published first, though, correct?
The book did come out before the movie did. Yeah.
And then
I just heard about it before the book found a publisher, but that didn't apparently help.
And then you had this sort of larger sense of, I wonder if you could talk, leaving aside the movie for a little bit, like the book, from the book perspective. So now here you are, right? You have this book. Did it feel, and so often when we have these conversations with authors who have written like, a cornerstone text, right? We say like, did you realize like what you were writing?
Aww.
And
so sweet. No.
like, did you? No.
Does anybody? I mean, every single book you write,
funny,
I feel like
Meg, some people
love.
do. Like
Some
Loretta
people say,
Chase,
really?
when you ask her about Lord of
Really?
Scoundrels, she's like, I knew what it was. Like
wow.
Lisa Kleypas knew what she was doing when she was writing Devil in Winter. Like some people just
Like if they feel it's
they just
different.
it's
I think,
like
yeah.
a muse kind of thing.
Okay. I've never had that,
Me
and I wish I
neither.
would. But no,
So this is
every
very
single
heartening
book
for
I
me.
write, I'm like, this is gonna be so. I mean, I think you have to like psych yourself up that way, or else why are you going to do this every day? Because it's hard. It's really hard work, and so you have to say to yourself, this is going to change lives and the publishing it. And then, as far as I know, that doesn't happen.
So then you had Princess Diaries 1 sort of at Avon. Were they, whose idea was it that this would be like a longer story?
So I want to just say that the first person to buy the Princess Diaries was actually not in America. It was a British agent, a British publisher. It was Sarah Davies, who is with Macmillan in the UK. And they bought the Princess Diaries first book, and then they asked, and they said, "Can you do more?" And I was like, "Yeah, I actually plan on doing her entire high school career, and so there's going to be a book for her every semester," which was the plan at that time. And she was like, "Well, we'll just start with 3. So we'll do 3, and let's see how that goes." And I was like, "Damn, great!" And then the U.S. bought 1, I think. And then when I was like, well, I'm doing more for England, would you like those? And they said, we'll try the 3. And then fortunately, they worked out, which was good for my plan, which was to go through her entire high school career because I was having so much fun. And yeah, that worked.
And then at what point did you sort of say to yourself, because I think one of the things that we see a lot in romance and in writing in general is once you sort of have the character who everybody knows and loves. And at this point, by the time you had gotten to the end of 3, was the movie out? Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think 2 came out.
The whole world is in love with you and Anne Hathaway and Julie Andrews, right?
So
and
sweet.
So when you sort of have this moment, I think for a lot of authors, there's this instinct to like bleed the stone dry. Like, and what you did is you really like, you set down me a story and then you walked away and did other things. And I wonder if you could talk about the sort of choice to sort of like, was there just a sort of sense that like she was done and now you had other things to do?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I felt like that. Yeah. I just didn't have anything. I had planned it out and I didn't have anything more. So there's been a few extra ones since she graduated from high school because maybe an idea would occur to me or I'd be like,
well,
oh, this
and now
would be funny.
there's also an adult version, right?
Yeah.
There's like, we've seen her adult, but I feel like those are sort of fun additions. They're not, you are not
Canon.
Princess Diaries.
Yeah.
You are so many other things.
Well, thank you. I do think that it's important to challenge yourself. And if you enjoy something, it's so rare to get ideas for books. I know that people think, oh, that's what you do as a writer. You just get all these ideas, but I don't get them that often. And so when I do, I want to find like the perfect story and characters to carry that plot along. Usually I get plot ideas first, and then I put the characters in. Like what would be the most interesting character? Like for instance, for Princess Diaries, Mia is the person who least wants to be a princess. It wouldn't be a fun story if it were about me, who is dying to be a princess. And if that happened to me, I would be so happy. What's that story? Although I've mentioned that when I talk to kids, and they're like, "That was a great story, just write that." I'm like, no, like,
you don't
have to have a conflict. There's no conflict. They hate conflict. Kids hate it. They're like, no, it would be fine. I'll read that. So yeah, that's what happened. And so eventually, I would just have more ideas that wouldn't fit into that series, so I had to start other series. But again, like those ideas don't come every single day. It's just every once in a while.
So the other thing I want to talk about is the YA of it all. You're the first YA author we've had as a Trailblazer. And I think
wow.
I think that's because there is sort of a sense of YA being, it is very difficult to stay in YA as a writer. Like the audience turns over so quickly.
Yes.
You're constantly having to rejuvenate an audience. And I think you have really figured out a way to do this. And I wonder if you could talk about writing for young people. What is it that keeps you kind of constantly coming back to the well?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. I don't know. I think that I had, and I've kind of talked about this before, I had a really bad childhood. Like, it was not fun. I did not have a good time in my teenage years. And I really felt like I missed out on that. So one thing that I maybe am doing, this may be going into therapy speak, but I may be trying to relive my childhood and teen years in a more positive way. And I definitely am just super interested in stuff that kids are doing, especially girls, because I feel like as a group, they are probably the least powerful in society and the most preyed upon. And I really strong, especially now in this age of book banning, it makes me so angry because I feel like what I'm trying to do is give information in an entertaining way to girls, especially, but boys too, on how to navigate this world, which there are people who are going to try to prey on you. There's all sorts of terrible things that can happen, but in a fun way. So it's like the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, but mine's like there's a spoonful of medicine and a ton of sugar. And, you can read for fun, but you can also be like, oh, so this is something that exists in the world. Now, obviously, I was doing all this before the internet. Now kids know everything. Like, they're totally, they know way more than I do about everything. But, at that time, it was giving kids a glimpse into a different way of living that maybe not fully Christian-centered white people. Right. People who live in a city, people who turn out to have like some problems, but they've had positive people in their lives who help them through those problems. And it's okay. The main thing I wanted is to be like, it's okay to talk about all this stuff. Yeah. And the minute you stop talking about it, is when you can have some problems. So I just was observing that in my own life with teenagers that I knew and younger even kids. So it just was something that I wanted to
like the parents of my students. I'm like, as long as they are still talking to you, you're fine. Like, it's when they stop talking that you should really start feeling a little worried.
Yeah. And they're not going to talk to teachers too, because there's such a stigma against doing that if there's a problem at home or whatever. Right. So to me, I take it really seriously, and I'm really working on a new middle grade series right now that explores a lot of just being fun, having fun, but also kind of, using your intelligence and not being super naive about stuff, which I think actually translates really well from the romance genre, because that's kind of what we write about, is that it's okay to have problems. You can get through them, and it is going to be okay. Well, you're not going to die. Probably.
I teach middle school, middle grade is like a really even a harder, bucket in some ways to sort of get at, because it's like a smaller group of kids, right? Like they want to read really specific things.
Yes.
And I feel like so much of it is like fantasy that it's like anything else tends to be, so thank you from the middle grade teacher, that would be me.
Yeah, it's tough. And those are kind of the worst years. I remember those being really bad, that middle school. Oh my God, because your body's doing weird things and nobody wants to talk about it. And and there's no sex ed or anything really in schools anymore, at least in the state where I live. Okay, I forgot the question now.
I think
there are a lot of other great YA authors who came out at that time, the same time. I mean, it was Louise Renison with Angus Thong's Full Frontal Snogging was huge. There's a ton of stuff. And I just remember one book that I read when I was a teenager. I actually think I was like in 8th grade, which was called the Anne McCaffrey Dragon series. Did you guys ever read these?
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, now there's like a lot of stuff came out about Anne McCaffrey. So
I know, but I love
a huge series.
I loved them. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I kind of got really into romance. And as a kid, into fantasy romance. Because
I had a personal epiphany this morning. And I was like, I was talking to Adriana and I was like, I've never really liked books about girls and their horses. And I realized I also have never really liked books about girls and their dragons.
Yeah, you know what? I never thought about it, but they're kind of the same. They're kind of the same.
And it really was that was the epiphany. I was like, oh, horses and dragons, same energy. Yeah.
No, you're totally right. And I was super into both. So,
No, sure. I support you. Lots of kids are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to have to think about that later. So there were a lot of other people out there doing what I'm doing at that time. And it was great.
Did you have a community of writers at this point who were all kind of working together?
Yeah. You know what? One of the best things that ever happened, like in my professional career, was I got a message from Judy Blume saying to come over to her house, her apartment on the Upper West Side. I think was when she was come over. She was having a lunch and she invited me and Rachel Vale, who's another YA writer. And I think it was Wendy Moss, I want to say, just like, Carolyn Mackler. So there was a bunch of girls who showed up at Judy Blume's house for lunch. It was a lovely ladies' lunch. And we were friends after that. And I had another friend, Michelle Jaffe, who was also writing adult romance, but then she started writing YA. She's got the greatest YA voice. And we all just constantly, to this day, I'm still chatting with them all the time. So, whenever we are stuck on a book, we ask each other what we would do. And then we talk about just not that. Whatever it is.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Isabella Kamal, author of The Temple of Persephone.
Jen, this book is for me.
I love it.
It's like the perfect October read for me. You ready? Persephone Honeyfield is this like witty, intelligent, clever, amazing young woman who lives a very boring life with her father and sister in the English countryside. And she knows that her only way out of the like doldrums of gossipy like doyens down the lane is through marriage. And she also knows that the likelihood of that marriage being a love match is basically zero. I mean, it's the Regency, right? So on an errand to Gallowsgate, love it.
Amazing.
The estate of the Lords Barrington, she has a run-in with Aidan Barrington, who used to be like a total rake and ne'er-do-well, but is now a reclusive, sort of quiet, secret dude who runs the family's funeral furnishing business and who all of the scandal sheets refer to as the Lord of the Dead.
Amazing.
So anyway, she finds herself during this run-in on the brink of her own ruination, and she has no choice but to agree to marry Aidan and become the wife of the Lord of the Dead, a man she doesn't know and who is like very mysterious. I'm into it.
Of course you are. Perfect for you. And if you also, everyone, would like to read this historical romance with a marriage of convenience between a reformed rake and a wallflower, along with a really awesome sounding Hades and Persephone retelling, then The Temple of Persephone is for you. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Isabella Kamal for sponsoring this week's episode.
Can we talk, because I know you do events with young people. You meet the young people who read your books and love your books all the time. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that work, because I think one of the things that we don't talk about a lot as writers is the kind of emotional experience of meeting our readers and hearing them tell us like how the books feel. And so it must be very different. Like, I know what it's like to meet, women of an age, but what is it like when you're, sitting with kids and they are,
oh my God, hilarious. They're so funny. It was crazy because I'd only done signings with adult romance readers. And then the very first signing that I had for the Princess Diaries, I'll never forget. It was at the Red Balloon in Minnesota, a great children's bookstore. I walked into that room and I saw all these little kids and I was like, who are they here for? Like, oh, are you having two others? And they're like, no, they're there for you. I was like, wait, these are little kids. Like, they were so little to me. Maybe they were probably 10. They were age appropriate. They're 10. But, they had braces and they were wearing little tiaras. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot swear at this event. I am going to have to totally change everything I talk about. And that was so educational and so fun, though, because they asked literally the best questions.
Kids are just funniest questions.
So
authors.
Great. Yes. And it was so much, and I'm not going to say it's more fun than doing an adult, but it's so much more. I had an event where really early on, and it was actually in New York City at that private library on the Upper East Side. They hosted an event for me. It was one of the first Princess Diaries events. And I'm in there and there's a little girl in the front row who will not stop asking about my cat because it said on my author thing. So she's like, tell me, why is your cat this? And what? And I was just like, this is hilarious. But at the end, this woman comes up to me and she's like, I just want to apologize for my daughter. She's the one who's asking all the questions about the cat. And I'm looking at this woman and she looked super familiar to me. I was like, did I go to high school with her? Or like, how do I know her? It was Kira Sedgwick. And that was Sosie Sedgwick, her little daughter, who's now an actress, who was like obsessed with cats. It was so cute. It was just like, oh my God, I love these kids so much.
Kids' questions are like, when we have authors at school, kids' questions are like, like stuff like this, like, tell me about your cat.
Yeah.
Right? Kids' questions are like, my mom says that she doesn't like it when I don't take out the garbage. Do you have an opinion about that? Right?
Yes.
And then, just like, they're so funny.
They're
like,
so
it's
funny.
Just, it's, kind of like, or they'll say a question like, I don't really like English.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
I don't really
absolutely.
like English.
Yeah, I get it.
Can you
I can
talk about like
that.
writing or whatever in that way? And then they're always disappointed that they're like, yes, revision actually is important.
Forget it.
And you can see
my
kids
God.
are like,
too.
they told me that, but I didn't believe it. It's
know.
it is really funny.
I had a teacher when I was like in 5th grade who told me, she kept making me revise the story that I was doing in the class. And I was like, why? Why do I have to do this? She's like, in the future, you're going to have to revise a lot. And I'm like, damn it. This is not adulting. It's hard.
No.
But she was totally right. What did you say that made me think of something about kids? Oh, the weirdest question I ever got was one kid was upset. He's like, did you come here in a helicopter?
Oh yeah, completely.
Like landed on the school. Oh my God, it was so funny. They're just the best. I said I did because I didn't want to disappoint him.
Oh,
because you see their little faces. They're
Smart.
so cute. I had the last. I did a study
yes,
with the Black
yes,
Canary. The Black Canary books, which are, it's a graphic novel. And this little kid came up to me. Oh my God, it broke my heart. And he goes, can you write the next Black Canary book about a boy who has to move because his dad got a job in a different place and he has to change schools and start over again? And I'm just like, oh my God.
They're so sweet. You just have no idea. Like, if you need like a shot of pure adrenaline, like go to a book signing where children are the audience for the author.
100%.
Yeah.
They're very dedicated to. And then when you get a movie made based on your book, and there's even the slightest change from the book,
moral
oh
outrage.
my God, Like I could be killed. Just like sometimes I was like, oh my God. I was so glad that movie, the first movie, came out before kind of the internet was around, because I didn't have to be the victim of people being so morally outraged that the father was dead. And he's alive in the books. And why did you make that mistake when you made that movie? I'm like, oh my God. I don't want to explain
kids,
the
let me
entire
sit you down
industry.
and talk about this process. Yeah, right.
Exactly. It's so funny. Oh God, those days. But yeah, so they ask great questions. So yeah, that is in answer to your question. That's the difference. They're very passionate too.
So, okay. So at this point you are Meg Cabot. You have written more than 80, I think, books. Is there something that you think threads them all together? We talk a lot, especially we have talked a lot with people about core story. Like what is a Meg Cabot romance always have? Like what do we know about a Meg Cabot book before we even open it?
I mean, I try to make it funny. So I think that's the main ingredient in all of my books. I really think that humor is the way that how my family has always coped with tragedy and conflict, and to either not necessarily to our advantage, but it's something that we've always done. And so I can't really relate to a book where there is no humor, although I definitely have been criticized by people who are like, I don't like humor, so your books are not for me. And I can't relate to those people in any way, because I think humor is so important and you really need it in not only books, but in life and everything, because otherwise, how do you cope? I don't know. So yeah, I would just say humor. And I will say that when I was writing in creative writing classes in college, that was something that was really missing from everybody else's story.
Yeah, I bet.
And I was like, wait, what am I doing wrong? And I had a great teacher named Judy Troy who took me aside, because I started trying to write super seriously and super sad stuff about like Vietnam vets, which I absolutely knew nothing about. But she took me aside and she's like, what are you doing? Like, you're really good at writing funny stuff. So just, and she said something I'll never forget. She said, anyone can make you cry. Like, it is so easy to make somebody else cry.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to make them laugh. And if you're good at doing that, that is what you need to be doing, because we need that in our world. And I'm so thankful to her, because after that, I just
this makes me think about a question that is something that we've been talking about a lot over the last couple of years on the podcast, which is this question of rom-com, right? Like it is so, because I agree. All of your books sort of have this hallmark of humor. And your adult books, more recently, you've been writing more adult, centered books and more adult focused books. And they're all so funny. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the rom-com. One of the things that we struggle with, and I think the whole readers across genre are struggling with, is everything is a rom-com, and if everything is a rom-com, then nothing is.
Right.
And so but I also appreciate that, like, this is one of those things where you know it when you see it is often the answer. But I wonder if you could talk about like how rom-com has evolved, but also like, what are we really talking about when we're talking about these books?
Right. So I think that everybody here knows that rom-com is just another name for chick lit, which is the genre I started out in when I started writing contemporary romance. It was all called chick lit. In the 90s, early 2000s. Yeah.
I remember Harlequin launched Red Dress Inc. Do you remember that?
Oh my God. I totally forgot about that until you just said the words. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the age of Bridget Jones.
Mm-hmm. Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing.
Yes. Susan Isaacs, that's a name that we don't hear too often, but Susan Isaacs, I thought, did really, really great. But I mean, it was just a name. It was a marketing name. We've had the same stuff existing forever. So it was called chick lit. Then they started calling it new adult. Now they're calling it rom-com and putting those, I'm just going to say it, hideous cartoon covers on them. And not all of them are hideous, but quite a few of them are not that great. And I don't want to know that much detail about what even my characters look like. I don't want to know. Like, I've got brown hair or whatever, and that's it. I don't need to see that. Oh, it's just excruciating. So it's not a graphic novel, so it doesn't need. Okay, that's just a different rant that I won't go into. So the rom-com name,
it's just a name. The choir here on those.
Fine, I like it.
I mean, it's just a name, and see people who are upset because maybe there's a little bit of angst or some conflict that's sad in their rom-com and they don't like that. And so it should just be pure. Don't get your peanut butter in my chocolate kind of deal. And it's just a name. And I think that, women's contemporary fiction, although I obviously know men who read them too, is probably a better name because not all of them are going to be. Most of them are not funny, I have to say.
Right.
The ones that I've read some really good ones. I think Susan Elizabeth Phillips does it really great, but I don't know if I would call those rom-coms today. I mean, that's what they're being branded as.
They're funny, but they're
funny.
Voice. It's in the voice that it's funny.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like situational humor or right.
To pin down.
It's very hard. It's very hard. Somebody I've been reading a lot. I've been reading the Bolu Babalola. I love to just say her name, so I'm going to say it because I like to say it. But I mean, her books, she's a younger author who's writing now contemporary romantic fiction. Is it rom-com? I mean, it's funny. There's funny parts, but there's serious parts too. So I think we've always needed a better name for what it is that we do. And you know what it is that we do is fiction. It's fiction. And then, I don't know. I know that people like to have I like to read mysteries in my free time. So I would be mad if somebody gave me a book that wasn't a mystery when I was looking for one. So I do understand why there was a need for these labels. But I don't know if that's the right one for what I'm doing or what so many of us are doing. Because even, your historical romances there are really funny. So why aren't they rom-coms? Because they take place in a different time? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I don't have the answers. I just write the books.
Well, but I think the thing that's hard is, as you said, your books really are funny, right? But like so many of them aren't, but they're being labeled rom-coms. And it's kind of like, well, because to me, what it feels like is sometimes we just don't want to say romance, right?
Yeah.
Anything we can do to not say romance is really what I think is going on.
Yes,
right?
You are so right. Yeah, it's just a romance.
Right.
And,
It's rom-com.
And of course, that's
it's romantic-y.
And I just want to say that I am on the board now of the QS Literary Seminar, and some of us are trying really hard to get romance as part of that. But we did have an author, Lee Child.
What is the U.S. Literary Seminar?
It's a literary seminar. They have once a year, and it's very serious. They invite very serious. There's maybe been a romance author, but
literature.
It's literature. It is. But I had a great kind of epiphany moment at one of these because Lee Child, I think it was, stood up and he talked about how the publishing industry is a huge ship. Okay. It's a huge boat, and clinging to the side of the boat, a tiny little barnacle is literary fiction. Okay. The rest of the boat is romance.
Lee Child.
Romance. Mystery,
having a word.
Mostly romance. Like, oh my God, I love that. Because I was like, oh my God, it's so true. Because everybody
the man who invented Reacher has no patience.
I know.
For that barnacle.
He's hilarious. He is like, And there was like such a Paul fell over the audience when he said that. But I was in the audience going, yes. We are shit. We keep publishing afloat. The rest of you are barnacles. Oh, that was so mean. I loved it. We loved so much, and I never stopped thinking. No, yeah, but like, what the thing about it that makes me mad is like I read lit fic and they've got romance, and it's not the core of the story.
There's
but
a mystery,
I mean,
there's a
makes me so mad when men are like, I don't want to read romance. I'm like, you are literally reading a romance right now. Like that, you wouldn't exist first of all without romance. Hopefully, your parents loved each other, but it's just the core of all of our being. Like none of us would be here without that. Mm-hmm. And people put it down, and I get letters, and now I get posts on social media from women who are working in offices, and they'll be reading one of my books or romance, and the men in the office will say, why are you wasting your time doing that? And they say, what should I say? And I'm like, you should tell them.
You should say,
first of all,
The Avengers is genre. Like, come on.
Exactly. It's
like,
genre.
Why is
when
I'm
did
so
books
tired.
I know.
Like, but also like when did we collectively decide that books have to be medicine? Like, I think that's the
people
other
that don't
piece.
Read that have decided. I think is a big part of it, right?
What do you mean?
I mean, it's okay. Everybody has the thing that they enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
That they just
exactly
do because they like it.
Right. And nobody's thing is better than anybody else's thing. Right. They're all good.
You like to play golf. I like to read a romance novel.
I had a mom. I used to babysit when I was a teenager. So I had a mom of the girls I was babysitting for. And she said to me, look, take them to the library, but can you get them not to check out the Babysitters Club? Because that is all they will read is the Babysitters Club. And I'm like, what's the problem? Why is that a problem? If that's what they're finding comfort in and that's what they enjoy, that means that they are deriving from that, whatever it is that they need. And the thing that I love so much about that story was that the daughter who was obsessed with the Babysitters Club grew up to be a professor of children's lit. And she's
amazing
teaching, I think, at MIT right now. Yeah. I mean, it's,
well, look at all of us.
I hate saying, I hate saying be happy your kid wants to read because... But you should be happy that your kid wants to read and do not monitor what they're reading because they are reading. They know what to do. Like if something's above their heads, they're going to put it down or they're going to ask you, hopefully. Yeah. But let them read what they want. If that's comic books or graphic novels, it's all reading. And it's really, really important to support that, whatever anybody's reading.
Yeah. I wonder if we could talk just a little bit, like going back to your career, the arc of your career. Are there people who are lesser known who you feel like really were shaping genre with you? Like, I feel like because you were at the start of the boom in YA, were there people who were really advocating for this genre?
Yeah.
Sort of pre Harry Potter, surprising everybody and making everybody think like we have to do this.
Pre-Harry Potter,
but like during, once Harry Potter was huge, everybody was like, oh, we have to produce books for kids.
Right, yeah. I mean, definitely Judy Blume, I think is she just was out there writing the books that I related to as a kid. Mm-hmm. I loved Blubber, was one of my favorite books because it's about bullying and it was a realistic depiction of bullying where the bullies do not get punished. Like at the end, that's how it is. And it is very bleak. I was reading it again recently and I was like, oh my God, but I still love it because that as a kid, you can relate to that. So there were some writers who I really loved when I was first starting out who aren't with us anymore. Paula Danziger was huge to me.
Name. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she was out there. There was, I want to say Norma Klein, but I'm not sure. Yeah, right.
I remember.
I'm just looking over, and then now what I love is seeing authors who are doing both. Like Nisha Sharma started doing YA. She's, I think, she was definitely the first, I think, person of color to win a YA Rita Award back during the Ritas. And that was great. So the genre has exploded, not genre because it's a category, age category, but that age category has exploded. There are now books for every, like you said, there's the Dragon Girl books. There are books, LGBTQ has exploded. It's just so great how that entire age category has so many different kinds. So if you do want to read a mystery, but you want it to be for YA or middle grade, there's tons of things to pick from, which it didn't used to be like that.
What about in-house, outside, not just the authors, but like the people in-house? Were there editors or publishers who you were like, oh, that person really gets what we're trying to do?
Well, I think Abigail McAdam really did. Like, she was my editor for a ton of books, but I'll also say she rejected stuff that I wrote. She rejected The Mediator, which is a very popular series with my readers, about a girl who solves or helps people move on to their next life, whatever. And that I had to end up publishing under a different name because I had a contract with HarperCollins for the Princess Diaries and they didn't want competing. Yeah, I had a non-compete clause. So I first published those as Jenny Carroll, which was the name of my cat. And they didn't take off as much as I would have liked. However, they had a very dedicated fan base. And so later on, when I guess it was Simon & Schuster, they kind of fired Jenny Carroll because she wasn't selling well enough. Abigail was like, look, you can write we'll buy it and we'll redo it under your real name. And you can write more. And that was an amazing, to me, that was just so exactly what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So I really credit her with just totally embracing books for especially girls that are fun and really supporting that. And after her, I had, oh gosh, it's hard. I know you guys one of these days, and I shouldn't have thought of it. But I think Amanda Maciel was there. And now I'm working with Erica Sussman, also at Harper, who's just amazing. So it's just weird, though, because Erica, I think, might have grown up reading my books. So now we're moving into an area where there's like people who are young enough that they were around. They were some of those 10-year-olds probably.
Meg Cabot diehards.
I freaked out. And now they're adults and they're also amazing. Like they have gone into publishing or they're librarians or teachers or whatever, doctors. And I hear from them and it's so great. And I'm not saying that it's because of me, but it's probably because of Princess Mia. I don't know.
It could be, right? It absolutely
gave them that. She empowered them to pursue their dreams. So I just love that. It's really interesting now too. And I feel like I do see Judy Blume quite a bit because we live in the same town. And, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm like Judy now because I grew up reading Judy's books and now I hang out with her. And it's so cool to just see this generational love for that kind of fiction passed on.
And Judy... And I think you both another way you are like Judy is she uses her power for such good. Like she's so active, she's so vocal about book bans, she's vocal about young people. It's so obvious that she cares about her readers.
She does so much.
Which in a lot of ways is more important for you guys than it is for like those of us who write for adults. Like if we don't care about our readers, it's less obvious.
They're adults. And I mean, in the early days with the internet, we had before Facebook and all that stuff, I had a Meg Cabot message board where kids could come on and talk about the characters because there wasn't any other place where they could go. And, we would get kids who would be maybe suicidal. So we would have to go in and contact whatever their parents and stuff. And I mean, it really was kind of like I had staff that were helping to do that because it was so scary. And now, fortunately, I think the whole idea of mental health has obviously turned into a great deal more awareness than there was when I was starting. And so you don't have that worry, but it was definitely, and Judy, I know, has helped so many of her readers personally when they were struggling with things that nobody knows about. And I know about it because every once in a while, like I'll be over there and I'll say, who is that? Oh, that's that girl. And we helped her pay for college. I'm like, oh my God, wow.
Oh my gosh.
But nobody knows about that. So she's a super human being.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Claire Therese, author of The Starling Inn.
So Millie is working on a master's degree and is suddenly called home when her uncle Rowan dies. And he has left her the Starling Inn, which is this kind of beautiful old, 1800s, like big, I don't know, just like looms over the town type place. And, Millie is crushed by grief, but really sort of like, okay, well, I have a job to do, right? Like I'm going to hire Ethan, who is an old friend and an old crush, who is a local handyman to help her like kind of get the house and the inn in shape to sell it. But once she's there, she's like really convinced that maybe the place is haunted. And so her love of historical research comes into play, and she is able to untangle a bunch of these secrets and really also learn more about her heartache, her uncle's life, and the ghost haunting this inn. So she and Ethan are going to navigate this new beginning against all of these painful feelings of grief and loss and the world that they live in. What's going to happen when she sells this property that she has so much to her family?
Well, it's really interesting because it also sounds like it's got this kind of spooky, romancy, cold, foggy mornings, gothic horror, ghosty, Victorian haunted house vibe. So I think it's very cool. And if you also are looking for something that has all of those vibes, especially for this month, and also has a second chance romance, forced proximity, charming witty banter, and an absolute cinnamon roll of a hero, then The Starling Inn is probably for you. You can get it in print, ebook, and with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Claire Therese for sponsoring this week's episode.
Your most recent book, though, is a return to adult romance. And there actually have been quite a few in the past few years. So is that like, what's the appeal to you to kind of like, I don't know, like, are you still writing YA romance, or are you doing both? Or are you kind of moving? Like, where's your current kind of, I don't know, like love for what you're writing?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing everything a little bit. I'm doing some middle grade. I'm doing adult. The thing I think about with adult books now is that the people who obviously were reading my books when they were kids are now of the age where they're going to want to read about 30-year-olds, because I'm that old now.
Yeah.
And that's fun because I've always loved writing adult contemporaries. The historical romance that is being re-released right now, reading it 20 years later was so interesting because it was of a certain time, those early 2000s, when it was very crazy time, not just for books, but if you think about it, that was when people were being so brutal about Britney Spears. There was so much, quote, slut shaming that was going on. And it's interesting to me reading it now because I'm like, wow, the Victorians were a lot like
Still
that.
with us,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. So it was interesting to write the foreword to this re-release of Educating Caroline, because I just wanted to say like that the Victorian period was an era of great technological advancement for those people and societal advancement. But the early 2000s were like that for us too, with the advent of the internet and then smartphones becoming available. I mean, we have been rocked as a society by that in many ways, and particularly women. But I'm so happy with obviously we could always do better, but I'm so happy with the advances we've made, because slut shaming now is looked down upon, hopefully, in most friend groups.
That's your JD Vance, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, yeah. There's a whole group of people who are still all for it, but most of the people that I certainly talk to and whose books I read and stuff are very supportive of sex positivity. And it's so great. The whole Me Too era. I mean, it's just, there was a part of the Princess Diaries that they re-released it for the 20th anniversary. And there was a whole part where there's a teacher who is constantly massaging girls' shoulders and the girls think it's because he's trying to feel through their shirts for their bras. And that was a real thing that happened to me when I was in high school, and we had a teacher like that, and nobody did anything about it. They're just like, oh yeah, that's Mr. whatever his name was. That's how he is. Exactly. Now, as the editor pointed out, I think it was Eric Sussman, I was like, that wouldn't happen now. So it doesn't, obviously there's some things in the book that have stayed the same because there was no technology back then. I think Princess Mia really super wanted a beeper so people could contact her. That was the technology.
Of course she did. Did we not all?
She's like, oh. And I was like, I can't change that. Like, I can't update that because it's too hilarious. And also it's of this time. But I think I can.
You need a glossary. You need like
I think it's
what
okay.
Is a beeper?
Yeah, there's a kid who wants a VCR combo TV. That was like the pinnacle of a gift you could get back then. And so they're like, nobody's even going to know what that is. I'm like, I don't care. But we can get rid of that teacher because we have advanced enough as a society that now we all know if a teacher is behaving creepily, he needs to be fired.
Because you don't want readers to think it is normal. You want readers to think,
exactly.
That happens, I need to do something. And then that changes your whole book.
Right. But and it was just kind of a throwaway line, but I would keep it in because just in case there are some I don't know, I'm not going to say anything about Utah, but maybe if there's like some teachers in that area, then these kids haven't learned that lesson. That's something that we need to keep in, but we'll see. Hopefully things are just going to get better. That's what I'm thinking.
Let's hope so. We're doing our job. We're doing our part. Meg, this is often one of the hard questions, but we sent it to you ahead of time. So I wonder if you could talk about when you knew, or if you ever sort of realized like that you were leaving some kind of mark on the genre, and if so, like what is that?
Oh, I mean, I don't
like, did you ever come to a point where you were like, oh, I am sort of a trail. I mean, I don't know that you would ever think to yourself like, oh, I'm obviously a trailblazer, no. But I think that there is sort of this question as we get older or longer, like as our careers get longer, we start to see like the trail we've left.
Yeah.
And do you feel like there is that for you? And what does that look like for you? Or what do you hope it looks like?
Yeah. I hope it's those girls I've been talking about who have now gone out into jobs where they are teaching or they are giving their love of books and literature to the next generation. And to me, that is, whenever I hear from a reader who has become a librarian or become a teacher or is doing something, and almost all of them are, to help kind of promote healthy mental health and sexuality and all of that. I hope that I had something to do with that, because that would be so great. And I think that it's been really interesting to see that. But I also, sometimes I'll get a request for a blurb for a book that somebody has written, and they'll say, this is just like, this other book that I wrote 20 years ago. And I'm like, well, that's been done then. So why are we still doing? I mean, I know that there's all these different kinds of voices, but sometimes I do worry that there's other stuff out there that we could discover that we haven't done yet. So let's not concentrate too much on what was in the past. I mean, obviously we need to be aware of it, but I'm interested in seeing what they're coming up with. I guess it's because of comps. We didn't have comps when I was first starting out, and I just find it very strange. But I understand why they have it. But I get used as a comp a lot, and I'm like, well, okay. I wouldn't use me as a comp, but I know that sounds really bad.
When you hear from your readers, what are their favorite books?
Yeah. What's weird is that the books that have actually, I think, sold really well, especially internationally, are these books that I wrote in email format for adults called The Boy is Back and The Boy Next Door. And people really like reading books that are just completely told in social media posts.
Epistolary is like the best, right?
The most fun.
And diary books. I think that people love reading other people's business, and I do too. So I totally get it. And some of the books that I love.
Such a funny way to say it.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way, but you're right.
No, it's totally true. Everybody wants to read somebody else's diary. So diary books were huge for me as a kid as well. So Daddy Longlegs was one that I loved, or that was actually epistolary. Up the Down the Staircase. I don't know if either of you ever read that. That was a book about a teacher, and it's told entirely in like memos and little notes and announcements from the principal. And that, I just love that form of storytelling. And it's such a great challenge.
It's like Daisy Jones and the Six.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I love that way of telling a story that it's
like normal gossip, but in book form. Do you know about that podcast?
Yeah. And that's why we love social media, because we all want to know what everybody else is doing. And I think books like that are, and I think The Princess Diaries is partly that. Because you're reading somebody's diary. It's super fun. But evil and naughty.
And then we kind of flip the question on its head for you, which is, what is the book you are most proud of? What is the book that, if you could leave one book behind?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because it could be Princess Diaries, but maybe it's not. Often it's not the most
sweet.
The most popular.
No, it never is.
Yeah.
When I love to go to authors' book signings and literary seminars and listen to people talk, because the book that the authors always choose is not the book that I would choose. And in fact, sometimes like I loved P.D. James.
Yeah.
I loved her Dalgish Mysteries. And I went to one of her book signings, and she was asked that question, and she said the name of a book as being her favorite that I actively hated. Like it was my least favorite of her books. And I was so mad after that. I'm like, oh my God. Like she shouldn't have answered that question. Like, and so now when people ask me that, I'm like, I'm never going to tell you like what, because I definitely have it. But if it's not that reader's favorite, they may react as immaturely as I did and be like, oh, well, I'm mad now. I'm never reading her. No, I continue to read her books, but I was really thought differently about her. Like, how could she not like the Cordelia Gray books best? Because they're the best.
But I also think like it makes sense because your life, like the books to you are very different, right? The experience that we have writing them and the life that we are living while we are writing them and the things that writing these books do for us personally is very different than what they do for readers when they read them.
Absolutely. And the reader doesn't know that while you were writing that book, this was going on and it was a terrible time. Because if you're doing your job, none of that's going to show.
Or you were working through a real particular thing.
Exactly.
And it feels like a triumph in a way.
100%. And I do feel like, though, as a writer, your favorite book has to be the one you're working on right now. Because if you don't love that book, there's no way you're going to get through it. And obviously you hate it at the same time. You're loving and hating it at the same time, but you've got to be like, okay, this is the book. This is the one that's going to change the world. And so I instantly forget every other book that I've written when I'm working on something else.
So this is a pass, Meg Cabot, on that question.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, I think that's an answer. I did.
We can't convince you for posterity.
No. But I will say I'm going to tell you other people's favorite, like my favorite books, like Nora Roberts' Born in Ice. Okay.
The Born trilogy. On it.
Forget about
it.
My favorite.
Have you read it recently, though?
No, I don't want to.
So much.
You should listen to our episode, Megan. It's called The One Where the Hero Smokes.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that Nora does some smoking of her own in real life. So you got to separate the artist from the bad, filthy habit. I did not remember that he smokes, but that is really funny. I don't care. I still love this book. Sarah, do you have a book?
I do. Yeah, I do. I have a book that I would leave behind. The only one, not the only one, but like, if I were pushed to say it's this one or none.
Okay.
It's
which one is it?
It's Day of the Duchess.
Day of the Duchess.
Okay.
Which is not a book. I mean, like a lot of readers love it, but it's not.
Bold of you. I can see it. Yeah, no, I totally, but I'm never going to tell you mine. Also, because I think I did do it and I made a kid cry or something because the kid was mad and it wasn't there, but.
Okay, but you are holding Lorraine Heath's In Bed with the Devil.
Yes.
From the Scoundrels of St. James series.
So, yeah, she's somebody that I met very early on in the romance writing industry who I wasn't as familiar with her work. And then I started reading it and now like we're kind of friends. And it's so cool, but I try not to like fangirl all over her. But she's amazing. And an amazing person too. So it's really fun when you meet a writer that you love who also is a great person. Because that doesn't always happen. Sometimes they're not so great, as we know.
Never meet your heroes, right?
Yeah, I'm really lucky though because almost.
But I don't know. Yeah, you're dining with Judy Blume, so.
Yeah, almost all my heroes have turned out fantastic, except for that one incident with P.D. James. But it wasn't her fault. She couldn't help not
answering the question she was asked.
Dead.
Now
she's dead. I don't care anymore.
And now look.
Man, she used to do signings with a shot. Like they would pour her shots while she was doing, because she's in her 70s. So she was just like,
how dare you say you'd never read another book by that person? She was amazing.
Damn it. I know. Children of Men and oh my God, all those great books. So yeah. Oh, well.
Meg Cabot, this is amazing. This was a really terrific conversation.
So fun, yeah.
And
we knew it would be.
Yeah. I mean, unsurprisingly. Thank you for all the books over the years. Thank you for all the books to come. And thank you on behalf of every teenage girl who wanted to be a princess.
Well, and if you need future middle school readers for your next series, I have a whole group
I need that hookup. Thank you. Yeah,
I've got it right straight from the source. You just have to go through the gauntlet of like knowing them asking you a lot of crazy questions first, right?
All the kids that I know are like in college and adults now, so I need more access to kids, but I'm scared of it at the same time.
Yeah, they're the best.
I know how they are.
The best.
They're the best. They're the best. They're very high energy, but I thank you for what you guys do.
The re-release of Educating Caroline is out now.
Yes. On Tuesday. So Tuesday, September 5th. So Tuesday, September 3rd. Everyone can get their hands on Educating Caroline, which is newly updated. Although I didn't take out like all of the stuff that could offend people, so just you might be offended. I hope not. And there's a forward explaining why you might be offended because things were different back then, and
if you
as they were when I read it.
You're not going to be offended. You're gonna.
I don't think you will, but you never know. But yeah, thank you.
So that is out now. You can also go read All American Girl, which is my favorite of books. Because the girl saves the president and then falls in love with the president's son.
Oh my God, she does. She has the best time, but she doesn't think
she
she's
loves
having
Gwen
a good
Stefani.
time. Yeah.
So I feel very close.
You know what, Sarah? Listen, I'm going to put it on the list. All the books that are just about like the president's family members in peril. falling in
Oh,
love.
we
That would
should
be
do that. President's
Yeah.
President's
Yeah.
Because there's that
Relations in
fun
Peril.
one by Sophie. There's
Yep,
that Allie
Allie
Carter
Carter has
YA book that I
one.
really liked.
Oh, right. Allie Carter. Oh my God. I forgot to mention her. Hi, Allie. Love it. We had so much fun together.
I love that book. Oh, will there be another one of the Westcott, is it? That?
Oh, the witches? Yes,
Yeah.
I'm working on that now.
You know, it's no rush, but I did enjoy that. I love any story where like, oh, there's a secret society of like witch. You know, there's like a warlock. I can't remember the name of it. I love, you know, Girls and Their Horses.
Okay.
No. Secret Society of Warlocks. Yes.
Real witches, if you're out there now, like we could use
Please.
it.
Some support somehow.
Today's
Yeah,
the day.
we need a spell. We need a spell to help us to do well in the future. Great. Okay. Well, thank you. And
Yeah, I loved it.
This was so much fun.
Thanks
you
for joining us,
for
Meg.
this. Oh, you too. Thank you.
Well, that was so fun.
You know what I really believe in my heart, because I work at a middle school, as you've all heard, and I'm lucky enough to work in a middle school where we have authors visit, is I do think YA authors, a lot of them, not all of them, there's no, you know, tend to be like super energetic like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, you have to be, right, to sort of like meet kids in that space where they feel the same way all the time. But yeah, that was so fun.
I knew that Meg was a romance lover, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't start your career in historical romance and not be a romance lover. But when she pulled out the hardcover, the like print copies of the Carol Mortimers and the Penny Jordans,
yes,
forget it.
Amazing.
I was like, oh, one of us.
One of us. One of us. Man, those old
There's
Harlequin presents with that round.
Jen and I are never sure. Is it going to be one of us or is it going to be somebody else?
One of us, Meg Cabot. Well, and it was just really, it was funny to hear, like, I didn't realize, maybe you've said it before, but I don't know if I connected it, like, right, as I didn't know if it had gone together in my brain, like the story about, like, somebody with 100 manuscripts under the bed. When you said a lot, I thought you meant, like, 6. What would a reasonable like
a real legend about Meg that gets passed around, and so of course I was very
you're like, I gotta know,
to ask about it. Every once in a while we have a Trailblazer on who has a legend like that, and you get to ask about it. See Nora Roberts' legends about wanting to taste her blood in her throat. But Janet Daly's blood in her throat, that is. But like this is a woman who, in a lot of ways, like to borrow from Hamilton, like wrote her way out, right?
Yeah.
And I loved that she was so honest about why and like what she was doing with her writing and what she was doing with her manuscripts. And it's interesting, Jen, because I think one of the things you and I have talked about a lot recently is I think a lot of young writers are doing exactly what Meg was doing, where they are like writing their way through their mental health or like mental space.
Right.
And like trying to reconcile like trauma and experience and childhood and life in general. And like, let's be totally honest, the last 5 years, the last 10 years of life have been very fraught for a lot of us, right? And I think what's different is Meg didn't have a place to put all of that stuff except under her bed. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of young writers are finding space online to put that stuff. And also are finding ways to like complete their books and put them online. So we're seeing a shift in the genre in a lot of ways, because I do think we are seeing these first few books more frequently now than we ever did when we were younger, because they would go under the bed or they'd get rejected or they'd get, you know, and so they'd stay unedited or even unseen, right? Unshown. And I think that there's, you know, there are obviously like very good and very bad things about this. Like, you know, I mean, I don't know, maybe not very bad, but there's like, you know, maybe we're seeing in a lot of ways like a real authentic experience on page, like a real authentic, like, in-depth, like the internal stuff that's on page, feels very raw.
Yeah.
But also these books are often not, they're not as edited, they're not as revised, they're sort of much more,
Well, there's like
they're
a real
raw.
time capsule effect almost to them as well, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right, like they're just a product of whatever it is, and if it's unedited and raw, like you're like, wow, it's just like reaching right back into the
right. And so I think it's really fascinating because I love that people are feeling like more confident, they're finding more community, like all of these things. And I just think that it's interesting because we are seeing that in genre in a different way than we ever did before.
Yeah.
So it's cool that Meg has like all her raw stuff under the bed.
Right. I was really interested, every day, I don't really talk about teaching a lot on here, but obviously I've been teaching for a long time. I've been teaching for as long as Meg has been writing. And that whole shift in YA is actually a really fascinating one. And it's not something we will ever cover extensively in this podcast, but a book I really recommend if you're like either interested in or like my age, right? And kind of remember, like, it's not that there was no books for kids or teens before Harry Potter, but it was very different. And there's a really terrific book. And I would actually, it's one of the few books I recommend that you get in paper if you're interested, because of like its presentation is really spectacular in paper and you kind of misses something in digital. And it's a book called Paperback Crush by Gabrielle Moss. And it's essentially, the subtitle is the totally radical history of 80s and 90s teen fiction. And it's really great. And it really dives into like sort of some of those like, first romance series, or a book series called like Couples and Cheerleaders, and you know what I mean? Like these books existed, but they just weren't a powerhouse. Like it was not something that, oh, everybody is tuned into like what's happening here. And so in that way, I think, and then you have like R.L. Stine and Goosebumps in the horror space. And it's just really like, there was a real sense of like books for kids could do anything. And it was really interesting to hear her then talk about, kind of like that big shift that happened around Harry Potter, where all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is also we can make a lot of money here. Yeah. Right.
Well, it's interesting too. And I didn't bring this up in the conversation because we were moving so quickly.
Yeah.
And we also don't talk a ton about Harry Potter on the podcast. Because J.K. Rowling is a notorious TERF, and we don't.
Right.
But one of the things that is often forgotten when we talk about Harry Potter in the world is that it too was acquired first in the UK. And so it's interesting because now we, of course, look at publishing, and publishing is so US-centric. I mean, globally, publishing is US-centric, right? But there is... But there was this time, and I sort of thought to myself, like, oh, it would be really interesting. Like, we are a romance podcast. We're not going to do this, like you said. But, like, if you're out there and you're a YA podcast, it would be really fascinating to get those editors.
Oh,
The person at Bloomsbury who bought Harry Potter, the person at Macmillan, I think she said Macmillan or Hachette, I can't remember who, at wherever that is, who bought the Princess Diaries. Like, but I think it would be really fascinating because the UK was doing a thing. And then the US was like, oh, hey, look at what the UK is doing. And that is less common, although not uncommon in romance because Mills and Boon.
Because of Mills and Boon,
right? In a lot of ways.
Right. So yeah, it's just really interesting. I'm sure that, I mean, we talk about like big shifts in romance, but like those shifts in YA were massive, right? And it really became, something where you think about the Princess Diaries was everywhere, right? It was everywhere.
I mean, and I hadn't realized that like the movie had sold first, and then
sure.
I know that sometimes happens, but like it just had never.
Well, I was looking. So the book came out in 2000, and the movie came out in 2001, which is remarkably close, right? It takes a long time.
But it's interesting because I feel like that, I mean, the Princess Diaries does still feel like a cornerstone text in like pop culture.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Genovia, like just like the name of that like place.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Anne Hathaway, Chris Pine, like the whole of it all, right?
Talk about like perfect casting, and her talking about Julie Andrews. Like, can you imagine?
Imagine getting that telephone call at work.
No, I would.
Julie Andrews is in.
Walked out by.
I know,
right? So I do think that it's really, and it's really interesting.
Hector Elizondo. I mean, like a real who's who of terrific.
Yeah, right. I mean, Pretty Woman, right there. So yeah, I mean, I think, and it was really interesting to hear Meg talk too about, like that story about don't get a degree in writing because it will ruin your love of writing.
And you thinking it was Franzen and not the husband.
I was
for
joking.
Shame.
I mean, I just was like, it'd be really funny if it was somebody who then made a lot of money in writing it.
But still.
Just like Franzen, like, yeah. No, of course. But I was really fascinated by that because I do think she was talking about an undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
As opposed to like an MFA, which is, very common. Lots of people get an MFA and go through sort of a process that many people, right?
Where they strip out your character.
Right.
Or,
it's like, especially like stories by, BIPOC authors have a very different experience in those spaces, right? Meg really being explicitly aware of like writing things that were funny or writing things that were, centered, the lives of women and girls. It's really interesting to hear. And, like, that wasn't that long ago. That was 2000. Come on.
Yeah. And how lucky she was to have a teacher who was like, what are you doing? When she was like, well, I guess I'll write about Vietnam. Yeah. Like, I mean, I can absolutely see that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I tried to take a creative writing class at Smith, and you had to submit pages, and I submitted pages of a romance novel, and did not get into the class, and the note from the professor was that my work was like derivative and reductive, and like, and it was a romance. So look at me now.
Right. Like, I'm trying to be like,
I got a podcast and everything.
Right. Well, or I was like, but really fast.
Like, that's the challenge, right? Being somebody really like drawn to genre in these places that are that demean it. Right. Diminish it.
Right. Well, that is why the other part, the story about Lee Child saying, right, like litfic is essentially,
that's right.
Of course, that's Lee Child. You guys, I love him so much.
Lee Child calling litfic a barnacle.
I mean,
and you just having to take it. Franzen in the room having to take it.
Yeah, right. You know what? I think, though, it comes from a defensive place. But, like,
of course,
the thing that we also know about romance readers is, like, they read everything, right? I mean, like, even Meg, like, talking about the kinds of things she likes to read versus she likes to write. Or, having her old favorites and the things that she's reading now. And I think, like, that's just all, that's the best part. Like, all reading is great reading, right?
Yeah.
And so it feels like we can be generous and say, like, of course, all reading is great reading. But, we don't often get that in return. I think that's why we then want to call you a barnacle.
Oh, boy. And I just think it's really, I think it's amazing to talk to somebody who's like really still in it too. Like, I mean, not that all of the other Trailblazers we've talked to haven't also been in it, but I think Meg, I think there is a real, there's a different feeling to somebody who knows what it is to write for a group of young people who are like constantly turning over, right? So like she does have to really keep it fresh. And that is a challenge, I'm sure. And I think she does such a good job of it. I think I loved her story about Judy Blume, like inviting her to her apartment with a bunch of other writers who were, you hear that about Judy Blume, that she like really was committed to is committed to pulling up the people who, came in behind. And it seems like Meg, I mean, she had no trouble like naming
Right, all those people. Yeah. Well, I was also just really interested in this idea of plot coming to her before character. Right? Like that to me is always like I love hearing authors talk about the imagination or the generative stage of writing, right? Before they actually ever gets to paper, and the idea that like little like pieces of plot are coming to her constantly, and then she's having to think like which characters would this have happened to, right? And I think that is just really fascinating. That's like one of my favorite things about talking to authors is hearing about that stage, right? Like where it's like, what comes to you first? That's like a really interesting question. And I think a lot of people end up answering it just out of, kind of the nature of these conversations. But I found myself thinking like, oh, we should add that as an explicit question for future Trailblazers, right? Like what comes to you first is like a really interesting
we should
types of question, but especially when it's someone who is obviously very generative, right? I mean, if you have 100 books under the bed,
You're
right?
We don't talk about the work of writing with them, and that's true. It's a missing piece.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just comes up, right? Like we're so interested.
Some people are very
Yeah.
interested in talking about craft, and other
Right.
people are not. But
Right. And that's okay. Yeah.
But no, I mean, talk about somebody who clearly knows how to write a book, right?
Obviously.
I mean, I just can't fathom. I've said this before, but like I can't fathom putting 100 manuscripts under lock and key.
No.
Like you would never. I would have written maybe one, possibly two, and then that would be like I'm going to be a vet.
Like forget it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I would imagine that there are real hidden gems of ideas in those books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like she wouldn't write them the same way now, right? But like if she came, open one up and read it, she'd be like, oh, that's a great idea. What would I do with it now? And that I think is also really interesting.
Yeah.
Right. To have that, yep. And her talking even about like sort of rewriting Princess Diaries and like what happens when a character is 15 instead of 30 and it means they don't have to go to work every day and they can go to prom. Like that was really interesting.
But so interesting, right? Because I think one of the challenges, one of the biggest challenges, and I know this because I have faced it over the course of writing my next book, which is out in the summer of 2025, is sometimes you write things that are true, right? The experience, we talk so much about writing as being like it's just write your truth. Like just write what you know, write what you know, right? And so you write something that is true. And then you look at the character on page and you think, no one will believe that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to sort of sit with it and go, okay, well, what I know is true is not believable in fiction, which is a mind fuck, everyone.
Oh, yeah, completely.
But, the difference between reality and fiction is that people have to understand fiction. And so I think it was really fascinating. I was fascinated to hear her tell the story about her mother and how she wrote Princess Diaries with me as 30. Because, of course, like grown children go through this. But the idea that like no one would understand it.
Right. Or it would, we would judge that character in such a different way.
Really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Right.
And I think like a thing that we rarely think about when we're reading, but we contain multitudes.
Yeah. And listen, as an editor, I have made those notes in people's manuscripts where I have been notes. I'm sorry, I don't understand why this 40-year-old keeps thinking about shit that happened in high school. Right? Like I have made those notes. I have said that exact thing that like you have to give like this adult character an adult arc. And if it dates back to them being 18, then they need to be 25. I have made those notes. So it's really fascinating to sort of hear an author be like, what do I do with that then? Right?
Yeah. But the truth is that when we all go to therapy, we don't talk about being 35 often. We talk about being 16 a lot. And because those are where the buttons are installed. It's really fascinating. And I so enjoy talking to Meg every time I do. This was such a fun conversation. She's so electric. And I think that if you have never read a Meg Cabot book, we are going to put a few recommendations, our faves, in show notes, and we'll separate them out. But as I said to Jen, who has not read All American Girl, listen, there's no sex in it, but it is a banger of a romance. It's really terrific. There's no sex in it because she's like 16. Everyone.
You know, when you meet an author who you're like, I love her energy, and there are 80 books in the backlist, right? You're going to find something you are interested in. You're going to find something at the library, right? Like, this is someone who's going to be really easy for you to access to. And I love that too. Yeah, I love that. As I sat down to record today, I thought to myself, oh, I'm going to buy the Princess Diaries for my daughter. Like, I think fun. Yeah.
What a very fun.
Yeah.
And also, let's rewatch.
Yes, right?
Let's just go watch a movie this afternoon.
Doesn't that seem like a nice thing to do?
I'm Sarah McLean. I'm here with my friend Jen Prokop. We are Fated Mates. We are here every Wednesday on your preferred podcasting app. You can also find us online at fatedmates.net, where there are extensive show notes for you to check out, and book recommendations and links to all sorts of things that we discussed in the episode. You can also find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram at either Fated Mates or Fated Mates Pod. And if you really love talking about romance novels and getting down in the weeds with us, you can join our Patreon, where you get one extra episode every month. That's available at fatedmates.net/Patreon. You can also, when you're a part of the Patreon, join our Discord, where there are other Firebirds just waiting to talk to you about romance novels and a million other things. Voting is actually taking place right now on the top 100 romance novels of all time. And other than that, we hope you read a great book, watch a great movie.
Yeah.
I hope you have
be a princess if you want to.